Well, the big story tonight, the U.S. government has made it clear to the beleaguered automakers GM and Chrysler that they will have to do more to survive. Today, the Obama administration rejected the turnaround plan from GM and Chrysler.
That's right. On What's On Tonight, we ask, will GM and Chrysler survive? Joining us tonight, Anil, Head of Auto Research at Frost & Sullivan in London. Also with us, CNBC US's Phil LeBeau joining us live from Washington. Phil, let me begin with you. Is this really the last chance for both GM and Chrysler?
Well, let's be clear here. General Motors is going to get a lot more chances than this. The government has essentially said, we're going to make sure this company stays in business. We're going to restructure them. As for Chrysler, sure, it is a last chance. So when you look at these two companies in terms of what's next, keep this in mind. For Chrysler, the next 30 days will determine whether or not this company ends up making a deal with Fiat work. If it does, it'll be eligible for another $6 billion in government aid. If it can't make that deal work, then Cerberus Capital will have to make a decision in terms of whether to go into bankruptcy or some other decision regarding the future of Chrysler. As for General Motors, the government is actively getting involved in restructuring this company over the next 60 days, and that may include the possibility of a prepackaged, strategic, what they're calling quick rinse bankruptcy. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. We've been talking about Chairman and CEO Rick Wagner resigning from the company. Also, keep in mind that the GM board will have to be reconstituted over the weeks and months to come so that the majority of members are new to the company from outside the company. Rick Wagner did resign at the request of the White House. It was not a condition of General Motors getting more aid. This was a case where the Treasury Department felt that the best move for this company is to elevate Fritz Henderson into the job of CEO. Remember, he's been with the company for 25 years, so there's some continuity there. He's worked a long time at General Motors, understands the intricacies there, and he's highly regarded within the company. There's a level of comfort there, and he's likely to work actively with the White House. He's not going to be somebody who's going to balk at the demands of the White House in terms of how this company is restructured. And make no mistake, the Treasury Department will have people in Detroit at General Motors dictating how this company should be reconstituted. Expect GM to be leaner, perhaps more conservative, certainly a smaller company, and also the key battle that's going to happen over the next 60 days, whether or not you can bring the debt down with the bondholders. It was supposed to be reduced by 2/3. Expect that to go even further. Last night, the White House was saying that debt needs to be restructured even further. 2/3 of a cut is not enough. All of this brings up why shares of General Motors under pressure today, and the main reason being the concern that the White House is greasing the path here in terms of the steps that have been taken for at least a quick prepackaged bankruptcy, which of course would wipe out shares of General Motors.
All right, Phil LeBeau, thanks very much for joining us from Washington with that. Let me move to Anil now. Anil, let me begin by asking you, with the Obama task force rejecting the turnaround plans for GM and Chrysler, as you just heard Phil detailing those, what do you think really are the options left before the two companies? Phil was talking about some of them, but what to your mind are the options left before the two auto giants?
To begin with, the real option in front of them is to go back to the drawing board, to once again negotiate hard with their bondholders and, of course, with the union members to come back with a better plan of managing the debt of the two companies. It's very clear that the Obama administration is obviously not impressed by the fact that they've not addressed the primary issue of the two companies, which is the volume of debt that they're currently carrying on their books.
Anil, what do you reckon? Do you think GM and Chrysler will survive as independent companies even if White House gives them that leeway?
They definitely can. I mean, they do have some products that have potential. However, what is very, very important is at this stage, as the administration, as the task force has rightly done at this stage, they will need to have sweeping changes. Their product portfolio will really have to change quite significantly because they don't seem to have the right products for their long-term sustainability.
Right, but Anil, that is the real problem. You were talking about the product portfolio. Now, the charge against GM is that they have been unable to produce fuel-efficient, environmentally friendly cars. They've been unable to take on the Japanese onslaught. Do you think even if they survive, will they actually be able to make cars that will fit into the consumer demand portfolio at this point in time? And how long will it take for them to actually make that switch?
That is one of the big issues at the moment. That their whole product line is dependent on the SUVs and truck models itself, which are not likely to be the products of the future. As you can see from what the Obama government is doing, what other governments around the world are doing, there is a strong push towards vehicles which are not only much more fuel efficient, but also alternate powertrain vehicles, particularly looking at electric vehicles and hybrids. And obviously, if you look at GM and Chrysler specifically, these two companies have been very late to come on this bandwagon. Not only have they been late in terms of developing or initiating the development of these models, but even today, for example, GM is talking about the Volt, which is still in a concept phase. So as a result, very clearly, these two companies have been very slow in terms of upgrading their product lineup. So unless and until there is a strong push towards changing that product lineup, they're not likely to be able to survive, which is one of the reasons why a part of their turnaround plan is really about, closing some of the brands which were simply not, adding any value to their portfolio, that were not growing. So what we will essentially see is these two companies shrinking quite a bit, and that is the only way they will have an opportunity to survive based on a new, younger, and much more, appealing product portfolio.
So do you think, Anil, that if those brands don't work, given the technologies and assets that they have, do you think they will anybody be interested in buying them?
To some extent, yes, I would imagine. For example, GM's overseas facilities, GM's overseas business units, I think would be very attractive. For example, their units in not only the ones in Asia specifically, I believe will be very attractive. So I'm sure there will be other OEMs who would be interested in taking up some of these facilities. On the other hand, if we take in Europe itself now, Opel is has already filed for, requested for government support over there. Saab is already filed for government assistance. So probably the European brands, not so much. They are already, although they are negotiating for some investment with potential investors. But I think the most attractive will be these companies' assets and their brands and portfolios in the emerging markets, particularly in the BRIC regions. And particularly, I think GM will be a lot more attractive than Chrysler, because Chrysler, again, was primarily concentrated on the North American market and has very limited presence in some of the other emerging regions. But on the other hand, GM would, of course, be attractive, has got attractive assets.